Imagine a bone-chilling wind and endless, ice-covered expanses. Are you ready to learn the truly shocking truth about survival in the most extreme and unforgiving winter conditions of the Great Plains? Today we'll talk about things that will literally make your blood run cold. Winters in the vast, wild territories stretching from the Missouri River all the way to the Rocky Mountains were so harsh that they didn't forgive even the slightest mistake or momentary hesitation. One wrong step and the icy wasteland would claim the life of the unwary traveler forever. But how did people manage to survive in a place where a modern person without special gear would give up after just a couple of hours? Before I reveal this secret, go ahead and hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss our new historical investigations. But what exactly was this amazing technique, and how did they save those who had already fallen into the clutches of icy death? Be sure to watch this video all the way to the end. Don't switch channels under any circumstances. You'll be amazed when you learn how the Lakota could unerringly identify as many as 6 hidden signs of frostbite in just 2 minutes. In the second part of the video, I'll explain in detail the emergency and sometimes terrifying measures they took to immediately save those freezing to death when there were no doctors or warm shelters nearby. I assure you, this knowledge will completely change your perception of human endurance. What if I told you that everything you believed is untrue? And the first sign of freezing isn't actually shivering. Native Americans' knowledge of the human body was based on a deep understanding of how blood circulation changes in extreme cold. The Lakota knew that skin color serves as the most reliable and quickest indicator of a person's condition in the cold. The watchful eye of an experienced tracker would immediately notice an unnatural flush appearing on exposed areas of the face. This bright red hue signaled the body's initial reaction to a sudden drop in temperature. At this point, the skin still retained its basic functions, but already required immediate protection from the freezing wind. The transition from red to pale white occurred incredibly quickly and required a lightning-fast reaction. White spots on the cheeks or nose signaled a complete cessation of blood flow in the upper layers of tissue. The Great Plains Indians closely watched the faces of their fellow tribesmen during long winter treks. Upon noticing a white spot, they immediately halted the group's movement to provide first aid to the affected person. Further cooling could not be allowed, as it would lead to irreversible damage to the tissues. In the culture of the Great Plains tribes, mutual aid was the foundation of the entire group's survival during the winter. Each member of the journey bore personal responsibility for the condition of the companion walking beside them. Regular visual checks of each other's faces became a habit from a very early age. This tradition saved many lives during the sudden blizzards characteristic of the region. The ability to quickly recognize changes in skin color was considered a basic skill for any adult member of the tribe. In addition to the face, close attention was paid to the hands, which were often exposed to the cold wind. If the fingers began to lose their natural color and take on a waxy pallor, a different warming method was used. The affected person would tuck their frozen hands under their armpits or on their stomach, using their own body heat. Thick winter clothing made of animal skins reliably retained heat, creating ideal conditions for saving the extremities. This process could take a considerable amount of time, during which the group remained in place or moved extremely slowly. The top priority was always preserving the integrity of the tissues, not the speed of travel along the route. Knowledge about skin discoloration was passed down not through abstract lectures, but through practical experience. Young people acquired these skills during joint winter encampments and short treks. They learned to distinguish a healthy blush from the specific redness that precedes dangerous pallor. Experienced mentors explained in detail each stage of the color change and the internal processes associated with it. This detailed transmission of information ensured the preservation of knowledge across many generations during the pre-contact period. Today, these ancient methods seem incredibly precise and consistent with modern first aid guidelines. Through trial and error, the Native Americans arrived at conclusions that are now confirmed by scientific research in the field of physiology. Their approach to warming excluded any aggressive methods capable of damaging the fragile structure of frozen skin. This demonstrates the highest level of observation and understanding of human nature among the indigenous peoples of North America. Preserved chronicles and oral traditions confirm the reliability of this simple yet effective diagnostic method. Skin color has always been the body's first and most obvious warning system in the fight against the cold. This unique knowledge of the human body offers a fresh perspective on the history of indigenous peoples' survival. Their ability to read the signs of nature and their own bodies ensured their prosperity even in the harshest conditions. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these ancient survival methods. Do you agree that gentle warming is more effective than vigorous rubbing? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new videos about the culture and daily life of Native Americans. Are you ready to learn the truth about how loss of sensation became an invisible but formidable enemy? The second most important sign of frostbite, which the Lakota recognized almost instantly, was complete numbness in the limbs. In the cold, a person would often stop feeling their toes or fingers, which was an extremely alarming symptom. The danger lay in the fact that loss of sensation brought deceptive relief and the disappearance of discomfort. A person freezing to death would stop feeling the cold and might mistakenly decide that the situation had returned to normal. Experienced Native Americans knew this trap set by the body and constantly checked their companion's ability to feel touch. The process of losing sensation developed gradually, starting with a slight tingling in the fingertips. If this first signal was ignored, the tingling quickly gave way to a complete loss of sensation. The Lakota regularly asked each other to wiggle their fingers inside their thick winter mittens. If a person reported difficulty moving or a lack of sensation, a forced stop was immediately called. Ignoring this sign was guaranteed to lead to the loss of the ability to hold objects or move normally. Immediate action in the event of loss of sensation differed radically from the response to a simple change in skin color. Here, more active intervention was required to restore deep blood circulation in the frozen limb. The affected person had to be sheltered from the wind using thick cloaks or natural folds in the terrain. Once shelter was established, the process of gently warming the frozen areas with warm clothing began. Hands were placed deep beneath layers of fur garments, closer to the natural heat source of the human body. Feet were carefully freed from shoes and wrapped in dry, pre-warmed bison hides. Special attention was paid to protecting the feet, as they were in the most vulnerable position. Lakota moccasins were sewn with the understanding that a layer of dry grass or wool needed to be added inside for insulation. If the insulation got wet, loss of sensation occurred several times faster than usual. Therefore, regularly checking the condition of the footwear and replacing the insulation in a timely manner were vital rules. The Native Americans always carried spare dry material with them for quick repairs to their winter gear. Keeping the feet dry was the best prevention against frostbite on the Great Plains. Training to recognize this sign began in early adolescence during winter training. Instructors explained that the absence of discomfort in severe cold was not a sign of endurance. It was a warning sign that the body was beginning to succumb to the onslaught of extreme temperatures. Young people learned to constantly listen to their sensations and immediately report any changes. Honesty in assessing one's condition was considered a sign of maturity and responsibility toward the entire tribe. This approach to loss of sensation demonstrates the Native Americans' deep understanding of physiological processes. Their first aid methods were aimed at maximizing tissue preservation and avoiding further injury. In the absence of warm homes, knowing how to act correctly in the field was a matter of survival. The Iroquois in the Northeast used similar principles, adapting them to the conditions of dense winter forests. This knowledge united different peoples living across the vast territory of North America. Do you think modern technology could replace this deep empirical experience of indigenous peoples? It's interesting to see how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world and under different climatic conditions. Where are you watching our videos from? And have you ever experienced a similar loss of sensation in the winter? Do you agree with the arguments presented about the importance of collective warming in the field? In the next chapter, you'll learn what the appearance of strange swellings under the skin meant and how the Native Americans dealt with it. This was yet another critical marker requiring immediate action. Guess what happened next when, after losing sensation, the skin began to change its structure? The third, and extremely frightening, sign of severe hypothermia was the formation of specific swellings under the skin. The Lakota were able to visually identify these changes, even in the dim light of winter twilight. The skin in the affected area became unnaturally thick and slightly raised, forming small bumps. This meant that the cold had penetrated deep into the tissue layers and fluid accumulation had begun. In such a situation, time was no longer measured in hours, but in mere minutes before irreversible consequences set in. The process of warming up took significantly longer when there was swelling than when there was only redness. The victim had to remain at rest for several days, staying in a warm shelter. The Lakota constantly provided such a person with hot meals and warm drinks to keep their strength up. Tribal members took turns keeping watch nearby, monitoring the air temperature inside the snow or leather shelter. They ensured that the heat was distributed evenly, without sudden fluctuations that could worsen the swelling. This care demonstrated the highest level of social cohesion among the tribes of North America. Knowledge of how to properly treat such swelling had been gathered over generations by trappers and hunters. The Cheyenne and Arapaho used similar methods. Understanding the fragility of the skin in this condition, they knew that the fluid inside the blisters would eventually dissipate on its own if the proper temperature conditions were maintained. The main task was to prevent the affected area from freezing again during the healing process. Repeated exposure to cold on swollen skin was guaranteed to result in the loss of the limb. During stops on long winter expeditions, the elders frequently checked the young warriors' gear. They made sure the moccasins weren't too tight, as tight-fitting footwear contributed to swelling. Loose clothing, allowing room for warm air to circulate, was considered the key to staying healthy in the cold. This principle of loose-fitting clothing is evident throughout the traditional winter attire of the Great Plains peoples. It was dictated not only by fashion, but also by the harsh practical necessity of survival. Loose-fitting leather shirts and capes protected against the development of life-threatening subcutaneous swelling. The Iroquois, who lived in longhouses in the east, were able to keep the injured warm for longer in comfortable conditions. Their spacious dwellings allowed them to maintain a constant, comfortable temperature around the hearth. There, the process of healing skin with subcutaneous blisters proceeded more quickly and safely. However, for the Lakota, living on the open prairie, every such case was a true test of endurance. They had to use all their skill to create ideal conditions from whatever materials were at hand. The effectiveness of these methods today amazes specialists in the field of extreme medicine. Indigenous peoples intuitively discovered the only correct course of action for severe frostbite. Avoiding aggressive friction and ensuring complete rest saved the hands and feet of thousands of Native Americans. Their wisdom lay in respecting natural processes and understanding the limits of the human body. Careful observation of changes in skin structure was the key to timely intervention. The nature of the Great Plains did not forgive mistakes, and the Lakota learned to read its harsh rules flawlessly. This unique survival experience demonstrates the incredible ingenuity and keen observation of ancient hunters. Their knowledge was passed down through the centuries, helping them overcome the harshest trials of the cold, like this amazing fact about the first aid methods of indigenous peoples. Please like this video if you're interested in learning about such unconventional historical details. Your support helps us create more unique content about North American culture. Want to know a secret that will change your life and your understanding of the limits of human survival? The fourth sign, signaling a critical stage of frostbite, was a specific smell. The Lakota possessed a phenomenal sense of smell, honed by a life spent constantly outdoors. They could detect the slightest change in the scent emanating from an affected area of the body. This sweetish, heavy odor indicated that irreversible changes had begun deep within the tissues. Detecting such a smell was the bleakest and most alarming moment on any winter expedition. In such critical cases, the group was forced to construct a stretcher to transport their comrade. Two long poles were fastened together with straps, forming a sturdy base for a makeshift sled. Warm bison hides were laid over these poles, and the person with the injured limb was placed on them. The transport had to be as smooth as possible to avoid causing additional suffering on the bumps. Fellow tribesmen pulled these sleds through deep snow, taking turns at regular intervals. Arrival at the camp marked the beginning of a long and complex process of caring for the injured limb. The person was placed in the warmest dwelling, closer to the constantly burning central hearth. The tribe's healers used decoctions made from oak and willow bark to gently wash the tissues around the affected area. This helped maintain cleanliness and prevented the spread of destructive processes to healthy areas. It was important to keep the area dry and warm, constantly replacing the soft leather bandages with fresh ones. Using the sense of smell as a medical tool seems surprising in today's world. However, for peoples whose lives depended entirely on nature, all the senses operated at maximum capacity. They gathered information from the environment at a level inaccessible to the modern city dweller. The ability to recognize the smell of changes in the flesh was the pinnacle of their diagnostic skill. These skills allowed them to survive where other explorers inevitably failed. Nature provided them with all the necessary tools to understand the state of the human body. It is important to understand that the appearance of such a smell was always regarded as the result of an unforeseen disaster. Usually, the Lakota did not allow frostbite to progress to such a critical and irreversible stage. This could only happen in the event of a sudden loss of equipment during a snowstorm, or if a hunter fell through the ice and could not quickly build a life-saving fire. Under normal conditions, their layered clothing reliably protected them from any manifestations of extreme cold. Preventing such situations was the foundation of the Great Plains survival philosophy. Thorough preparation of winter gear began long before the first serious cold snap. The tribe's women skillfully sewed the hides, ensuring that every seam was completely windproof. Thanks to this, cases of severe frostbite with tissue damage were the exception rather than the rule. But even for these exceptional cases, the Native Americans had a clear rescue plan in place. Their body of knowledge was absolute and all-encompassing, covering every possible scenario of winter tragedy. This remarkable ability to recognize hidden processes within the body demonstrates the Native Americans' deep connection to nature. They trusted their senses more than any external circumstances. Have you ever wondered how much our ancestors relied on their basic senses? Did you know this fact? In the next chapter, you'll learn how they coped with this terrible weather and reacted to sudden changes in human behavior. The fifth sign, which unmistakably indicated critical hypothermia, was a sudden change in a person's behavior. The Lakota Indians closely monitored the emotional state of their companions during long winter treks. They knew that the cold's effect on the brain caused unpredictable mood swings in those freezing. The first sign was often sudden and unprovoked aggression toward those around them. A calm and level-headed warrior might suddenly start arguing, refuse to go any further, or throw off his mittens. This irrational behavior indicated a disruption in the central nervous system caused by the cold. Aggression was quickly replaced by a deep, all-consuming apathy and complete indifference to one's own fate. A person might simply sit down in the snow, claiming that they were warm and wanted to rest a bit before continuing on the road. At this point, the person freezing to death ceased to realize the real danger posed by the freezing wind. Their speech became slurred and slow, and their reactions to external stimuli were severely dulled. The Lakota understood that this was the most treacherous state, as the person had stopped fighting for their life. Immediate action in such a situation ruled out any persuasion or lengthy discussions with the victim. Fellow tribesmen acted harshly, decisively, and as quickly as possible, taking control of the situation. A person in a state of apathy was immediately lifted to his feet, not allowing him to remain motionless. Two strong warriors would take him by the arms and force him to keep moving to maintain blood circulation. Physical activity was vital to ensure the heart continued to pump warmth to the freezing brain. If the person resisted, they were forced to walk by force, understanding that his survival depended on it. A change in behavior was a sign of general systemic hypothermia, affecting more than just the extremities. This meant that the temperature inside the torso had dropped below a critical level, threatening vital organs. Therefore, the Lakota always tried to protect their chests and backs with extra layers of clothing. They used capes made of wolf or bear skins, which possessed excellent thermal insulation properties. Retaining heat at the body's core ensured that the brain would receive enough warm blood. In blizzard conditions, when it was impossible to build a fire, a method of collective shelter was used. The group huddled tightly together under a large bison blanket, placing the injured person in the very center. The breath of several people quickly warmed the small space beneath the thick hide. This improvised shelter allowed them to weather the harshest storm without casualties. Inside such a cocoon, apathy gradually receded, and the person returned to a normal state. The key was to prevent the moment when a person would close their eyes and stop responding to sounds. Experienced hunters could always distinguish ordinary fatigue from dangerous frostbite-induced apathy. A tired person complained of heaviness in their legs, but retained clarity of thought and the desire to reach camp. A person freezing, however, lost their instinct for self-preservation and began to act irrationally and strangely. The ability to quickly recognize this difference was the most important survival skill on the winter plains. Native Americans honed their powers of observation throughout their lives, studying the psychology of behavior in extreme conditions. Modern science fully confirms the validity of the Native Americans' approach in such situations. Keeping the body moving and maintaining consciousness remain standard first aid practices for hypothermia. An intuitive understanding of the connection between cold and brain function saved the lives of countless warriors. Their methods were simple, harsh, yet incredibly effective in the wild. This wisdom was dictated by life itself in the vast, ice-wind-swept expanses. No modern device could replace the watchful eye of a comrade walking alongside in a blizzard. A shift in consciousness was the final frontier before a person finally succumbed to the elements. The Lakota did everything possible to learn how to bring their fellow tribesmen back from this dangerous threshold. Traditions of mutual aid and a deep understanding of human nature formed the foundation of their resilience. It was this solidarity that allowed the tribes of the Great Plains to conquer the harsh winter expanses. Their knowledge of the psychology of freezing remains relevant and surprisingly accurate to this day. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about is that sometimes visual signs are not enough. The sixth and final sign that allowed the Lakota to assess the severity of frostbite was the temperature of the limb to the touch. In conditions of poor visibility, when snowfall obscured faces, the Indians relied exclusively on touch. They would remove a mitten and press their warm palm firmly against a companion's arm or face. If the skin felt cold, like a piece of ice, and did not yield under their fingers, this was an extremely alarming sign. Such icy hardness indicated that the cold had penetrated the deepest layers of muscle. An experienced warrior could tell the difference between simply frozen skin and deeply frozen tissue. Ordinary cold skin retained its elasticity and quickly began to absorb heat from another's palm. Deep freezing felt as if there were a solid stone beneath a thin layer of skin. This density was unnatural and frightening, requiring the most urgent rescue measures. Assessing the temperature by touch was done quickly so as not to put the rescuers' hands at risk. The peoples of the eastern forests, such as the Iroquois, had an advantage due to their access to large quantities of firewood. In their longhouses, they could create a comfortable thermal zone away from the open flame. The victim was placed in a warm corner of the dwelling, wrapped in blankets, and provided with a constant flow of heated air. The Lakota of the plains lacked such luxuries and relied primarily on the thermal insulation of animal skins. They skillfully utilized the properties of materials, knowing that bison fur retains heat best. Checking body temperature by touch was a routine procedure during any extended stops along the way. The elders would go around the group, touching the faces and shoulders of the young hunters with their warm hands. This care was not seen as a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it emphasized the unity of the tribe. The ability to notice the icy stiffness of tissues in time saved lives by preventing deep muscle damage. No one was left unattended during the harsh winter months on the Great Plains. Every touch was a kind of medical examination in the wild field conditions. It is important to understand that all 6 signs of frostbite often manifested together, complementing one another. A change in color was accompanied by a loss of sensation, and icy stiffness came along with apathy. A comprehensive assessment of the condition allowed the Native Americans to form a complete picture of the injuries in a matter of minutes. Their diagnosis was lightning fast and infallible, based on 1,000 years of experience surviving on the prairies. They acted clearly and in unison, like a single organism facing the harsh elements. These ancient first aid methods inspire admiration for their logic and gentle approach to the human body. The avoidance of aggressive rubbing and the reliance on natural warmth saved countless limbs. The knowledge gained in the struggle for existence became a solid foundation of indigenous culture. Their ability to read the body's signals is an outstanding achievement of practical folk medicine. This legacy deserves deep study and respect from modern society. Nature was their primary teacher, a harsh but fair mentor in the art of survival. Checking temperature by touch was their lifeline in conditions of zero visibility. It allowed them to act blindly, relying solely on the sensation of heat and cold. Did you know this fact? In the next chapter, you'll learn how they coped with this terrible weather using unique principles of clothing design. Their gear was a true masterpiece of survival engineering on the Great Plains. The foundation of survival in extreme cold was well-designed, multi-layered clothing. The Lakota and other Great Plains tribes perfected the art of creating winter gear. The main principle was to use materials that provided maximum thermal insulation with minimal weight. The innermost layer of clothing, next to the skin, was made of the thinnest and softest suede. This suede excelled at absorbing excess moisture, keeping the skin dry even during intense physical activity. Keeping the inner layer dry was critically important, as moisture greatly accelerated heat loss. Over the soft suede, they wore loose-fitting leather shirts adorned with fringe, not just for aesthetic reasons. The fringe helped water droplets run off quickly in the event of a sudden thaw or wet snow. The shirts were cut in such a way as not to restrict the hunter's movements when shooting a bow. The air layer between the body and the loose-fitting clothing served as the main thermal barrier. The Native Americans understood that it was not the clothing itself that provided warmth, but the layer of heated air trapped inside. The outer layer was a heavy and incredibly warm cape made from a single bison hide with thick fur. The fur was always turned inward toward the body so that it created a dense barrier against the icy wind. The leather side of the hide, facing outward, provided excellent protection against the biting winds of the Great Plains. These bison cloaks were so large that one could wrap oneself up in them, head and all, during the night. During a heavy blizzard, a Native American could simply sit with his back to the wind and transform into an impenetrable fur cocoon. Such a cloak served as both a tent and a sleeping bag during short winter treks. The head and neck were protected by separate fur hoods, often made from wolf or coyote pelts. The long fur around the face created a thermal cushion that warmed the frosty air being inhaled. This protected the lungs from hypothermia and reduced the risk of colds in the winter camp. Hands were tucked into huge fur mittens, which were often fastened with a long leather strap. The strap was looped around the neck, preventing the mittens from being lost while shooting or working. Caring for clothing was a daily and mandatory ritual for every member of the Native American community. Upon returning to the teepee, the skins were carefully cleaned of clinging snow using small bone scrapers. The clothing was hung to dry in the upper part of the dwelling, where the warmest air from the hearth gathered. The Iroquois dried their clothes on special wooden poles under the roofs of their spacious, long houses. Regular drying prevented the loss of the fur's insulating properties and extended the lifespan of the gear. Wet clothing in winter conditions was an unacceptable luxury that threatened the wearer's life. The process of making such high-quality clothing required enormous effort and skill on the part of the tribe's women. They knew dozens of methods for tanning hides, using animal brains to give the leather incredible softness. A properly tanned bison hide did not stiffen in the cold and remained supple in any weather. The seams were stitched with tendons, which swelled when wet and completely sealed the needle holes. This technique provided complete protection from the biting winds sweeping across the open plains. Reliable clothing allowed the Lakota to make multi-day treks even during the harshest winter months. They were not confined to their dwellings and could actively hunt, providing the tribe with fresh meat. Their survival depended on the quality of their equipment, no less than on the personal endurance of their warriors. Clothing was their first line of defense in the never-ending battle against the unforgiving nature of North America. The wisdom of their ancestors was embodied in every stitch, in every carefully selected hide. It was this thoughtful protection that made them the true masters of the snow-covered Great Plains. The principles of creating layered clothing, established by indigenous peoples, are still used today. Modern manufacturers of outdoor gear replicate the system of moisture wicking and heat retention. Suede has given way to synthetics, but the concept itself has remained unchanged for hundreds of years. This proves the genius of the simple solutions devised by Native Americans over the course of a long evolution. Their winter clothing was the perfect tool for living in harmony with the harsh climate. In addition to warm clothing, the ability to quickly set up shelter in the field was a key factor for survival. In the vast expanses of the Great Plains, natural shelters were extremely scarce, especially in winter. Therefore, the Lakota learned to masterfully use deep snow to create temporary shelters from the wind. During a sudden blizzard, a group could quickly dig a trench in a thick snowdrift. They covered this trench with poles and bison hides, creating a sealed roof over their heads. The snow served as an excellent insulator, trapping precious heat inside this makeshift shelter. Inside the snow shelter, the Indians spread out additional layers of dry hides to protect themselves from the cold ground. They lay close together, making the most of their own body heat to warm the space. The temperature inside such a shelter could be several dozen degrees higher than outside in the wind. This was enough to weather the fiercest blizzard without the risk of suffering severe frostbite. Experienced hunters knew that attempting to walk through a blizzard meant dooming oneself to certain death. Regardless of the type of dwelling, keeping a fire going was essential for the winter survival of all tribes. Firewood was gathered in advance, before the first heavy snowfalls, and stored near the camp. Plains Indians, where trees were scarce, actively used dried bison dung as fuel. This material burned with an even, hot flame and produced virtually no acrid smoke in enclosed spaces. Having a reliable source of fuel ensured the community a peaceful winter without the risk of freezing. The hearth was not merely a source of heat, but also the sacred center of life for the entire Native American family. During winter encampments, the tribe's activity level dropped significantly as they shifted into energy-saving mode. Men went hunting only when absolutely necessary, preferring to subsist on summer provisions. Pemmican, consisting of dried meat, fat, and berries, was the ideal high-calorie food for the cold. It kept for years and provided the body with a huge amount of energy to warm it from the inside. Proper nutrition played a crucial role in preventing frostbite by maintaining a high metabolic rate. Women spent their winter days tanning hides and mending clothing, preparing for the spring migrations. Elders told myths and legends, passing down the tribe's history to the younger generation by the warm fire. Winter was a time of spiritual renewal and strengthening social bonds within the vast community. People spent more time together, which fostered unity and mutual understanding. This period of rest was necessary to regain strength after the strenuous summer hunting season. Nature itself dictated the rhythm of their lives, forcing them to slow down and listen to themselves. The entire way of life of Native Americans was guided by the principle of minimal resistance to the elements. They did not try to conquer winter, they learned to coexist with its harsh laws. This philosophy of adaptation allowed them to avoid unnecessary risks and preserve the lives of their fellow tribespeople. Building warm dwellings and sewing sturdy clothing were merely tools in this grand strategy. The main secret, however, was a deep, almost mystical respect for the strength and power of the surrounding nature. Only by understanding their own vulnerability could people prepare to face the icy breath of winter. Harsh conditions forged strong characters, unprone to panic or rash actions. Every step across the snow-covered steppe was measured and calculated several moves ahead. Their experience proves that the human mind is capable of finding a way out of the most extreme climatic conditions. It is a triumph of intellect and observation over the blind, destructive force of the freezing wind. The legacy of the Great Plains is a survival manual written by the very lives of the indigenous peoples. Psychological preparation for the long winter played no less a role than the availability of warm clothing or shelter. The Lakota instilled in their children incredible endurance and the ability to stoically endure physical discomfort. From an early age, boys were taught to ignore the mild cold during short walks. This hardening made their bodies less susceptible to sudden temperature changes in the future. But most importantly, it fostered a particular mindset in which panic in the face of the cold was completely ruled out. Calmness and prudence remained the Native Americans' constant companions in all weather conditions. Discipline in the winter camp was maintained at the highest level, as the group's overall safety depended on it. Every member of the community had strict duties regarding maintaining order and ensuring fuel supplies. Laziness or negligence regarding winter preparations was strictly condemned by the tribe's elders. Collective labor united people, transforming survival into a well-oiled machine that ran without a hitch. This social organization minimized the consequences of any unforeseen weather disasters. Native Americans possessed a remarkable ability to adapt to changing environmental conditions. If a winter proved particularly harsh, they would not hesitate to move their camps in search of better shelter. They could migrate to forested river valleys, where the wind was weaker and firewood was much more abundant. Their flexible thinking allowed them to always find the best solution to protect their community. They did not cling to familiar routes if nature dictated new rules of the game for survival. The ability to listen to the land was their main advantage against any adversity. It is important to note the role of traditional ceremonies, which were held even during the coldest months. These rituals maintained the people's spiritual connection with the forces of nature and instilled confidence in a favorable outcome to the winter. Singing and dancing around the hearth lifted spirits and distracted them from thoughts of the harsh conditions outside. Spiritual health was considered inseparable from the physical well-being of the entire tribe. Prayers for warmth and an early spring united the community in a shared surge of hope and faith. The Native Americans' medical knowledge was closely intertwined with their spiritual beliefs and philosophy. The treatment of frostbite was always accompanied by special purification rituals and appeals to the spirits. The healer not only restored the tissues, but also restored harmony to the victim's soul. This comprehensive approach ensured an incredibly high rate of successful recoveries, even in severe cases. Belief in the healer's power and the might of the native land helped the body mobilize hidden inner reserves. The psychosomatic effect of such rituals was immense and scientifically grounded in modern realities. Knowledge of the 6 signs of frostbite was merely the tip of a massive iceberg of indigenous wisdom. This wisdom was composed of thousands of small details, observations, and the practical experience of generations. It encompassed all aspects of life, from sewing moccasins to breathing correctly in the frosty wind. The Native Americans created a unique system of self-sufficient existence, unparalleled in world history. Their adaptation to the climate of North America was absolute and perfect in every respect. Studying their methods teaches us valuable lessons in respect for the world around us and our own bodies. Their legacy is not archival documents, but a living memory of the incredible strength of the human spirit, the ability to make do with little and overcome the great. This is the main legacy of the peoples of the Great Plains. This knowledge lives on in the traditions of their descendants, preserving the connection between times and eras. The wisdom of the ancestors remains relevant, reminding us of the true values of human existence. As we wrap up our in-depth expedition into the world of Lakota winter practices, it is worth highlighting the main point. The ability to recognize danger in a matter of minutes was the result of trained observation, not magic. Changes in skin color, loss of sensation, and the appearance of swelling are visual and tactile markers. They required an immediate response based on the application of gentle heat and the avoidance of any aggressive friction. An understanding of physiology allowed the Native Americans to act without error, preserving the integrity of the fragile tissues of the extremities. Their first aid protocols largely anticipated modern medical standards for treating hypothermia. The smell of deteriorating tissue and changes in behavior served as critical, high-level warning signs. Here, the speed of decision-making and the community's ability to work together as a coordinated team came to the forefront. Rescuing a freezing comrade became the absolute priority for the entire group of hunters. They were willing to sacrifice their own comfort to transfer their body heat to the victim. This selflessness was a natural expression of the deep social bonds within North American tribes. Checking the temperature of the extremities by touch complemented visual diagnosis in snowstorm conditions. Tactile contact allowed them to assess the depth of frostbite and choose the correct strategy for further warming. All 6 of these signs came together to form a single, flawlessly functioning early warning system. The Lakota created a true internal radar, tuned to detect the slightest deviations in the body's functioning. This radar never failed because it was calibrated by the harshest and most unforgiving nature. The Native Americans trusted it more than any external circumstances or favorable weather forecasts. An integral part of successful survival was the meticulous preventative preparation of all equipment. Loose-fitting, multi-layered clothing and roomy moccasins with dry insulation prevented heat loss. Women's work in tanning hides and sewing clothing was the very foundation of the entire tribe's safety. Every stitch made with sinew was a step toward preserving the hunter's life on the windswept plains. Without this impeccable protection, any knowledge of first aid would have been utterly useless. The architecture of shelters, ranging from simple snow trenches to warm teepees, completed the picture of winter adaptation. The ability to quickly take shelter from the wind gave the Native Americans a huge tactical advantage over the elements. They knew how to create a livable microclimate in a virtually empty, snow-covered place. This required not only physical strength, but also deep spatial thinking and an understanding of the laws of physics. The Plains peoples were outstanding field engineers, capable of building shelters out of air and snow. The Lakota's survival story is a brilliant example of how humans can adapt to any environment. Without complex technology, synthetic materials, or satellite communications, they felt safe. Their knowledge was based on respect, observation, and a millennia-old method of trial and error. Every rule of survival was written by the experience of ancestors who had endured countless winters. This legacy deserves to be remembered and studied with the utmost attention. It teaches us that the capabilities of the human body and mind are truly limitless. When we examine their methods today, we find incredible logic and medical validity in them. What seemed like primitive habits was in fact the pinnacle of empirical science. Indigenous peoples have left us a priceless archive of knowledge about how the body functions under extreme conditions. This archive does not gather dust on library shelves. It is recorded in the lore and traditions of survival. Understanding these traditions helps us gain a deeper appreciation of the history of the settlement of the vast North American continent. The culture of the Great Plains tribes will forever remain a symbol of unyielding will and fortitude. Their ability to thrive where others froze to death commands sincere respect and admiration. We hope this journey into the past has allowed you to take a fresh look at Native American history. Their wisdom, hidden in simple, everyday actions, opens up new horizons of understanding human nature. For them, winter was not the end of life, but merely a time of preparation for a new, warm spring rebirth. In this eternal cycle, they found their purpose and their true calling on Earth. Their unique approach to survival proves that nature can be not only an enemy, but also a reliable ally. Everything depended solely on whether a person knew how to read its signs and follow its ancient, harsh laws. The Lakota mastered this art to perfection, becoming an integral part of the endless snow-covered expanses. We conclude our story about these amazing survival and diagnostic practices on the Great Plains. We hope that this information was not only informative for you, but also gave you much to think about. We've covered only a small fraction of the amazing skills that helped indigenous peoples survive the harsh winters. Their experience is a valuable lesson in harmony with nature and incredible resilience in the face of the elements. Please suggest topics in the comments for future videos that you'd like to see on our channel. Let us know what other aspects of daily life or tricks of the North American tribes you'd be interested in learning about. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new in-depth historical explorations.